Hello my friends, this is Jeannie. Welcome back. If you are a first-time visitor, welcome and thank you. I thought I would share with you a process. This is kind of like a create with me, but here's the catch. I've never created one of these things before, so we are really in for a ride. What am I creating? I am altering a book for a swap. Janscrazylife, and I will link her channel down below, is hosting a book swap, an altered book swap. It is a Christmas themed altered book swap. So what you have to do is alter a book, account for all 31 days of December, so it's a December daily essentially, and the book itself has to be covered in fabric, and every single page has to have all 31 days have to have some kind of Christmas paper or Christmas theme to it. Okay, so as I said, I never altered a book before, and that was part of the appeal for me, the idea of doing something I've never done before. I like a challenge, and something to do, keep me busy. Okay, so what you will need for this project is a book, some glue. You will also need some fabric, because one of the requirements that she has for this particular swap is that the book itself be covered in fabric. So if you're going to do an altar book and you don't care for fabric, then obviously that step doesn't apply to you. But if you have fabric, or you've always been interested in working with fabric, we're gonna figure it out together, you and I. I think I figured it out because I already did one book. I started altering my Christmas book. I got as far as the fabric and ripping out the pages, and then decided to stop, kind of backtrack and share the process with you, because I got to thinking maybe this is something someone else would like to learn to do. Or someone who has always wanted to do it, has been intimidated by it, and here's your chance to watch someone who's never done it before do it. Okay, so you need a book, you need glue, you need fabric, you need paper, whatever themed paper you want to use or work with, okay, and your embellishments, and you're good to go. Now, let me impart to you the first thing I learned. Not all books are created equal. Oh no. I find that the newer books, especially books from the Dollar Tree, are so difficult and frustrating to work with in terms of ripping out pages, much more so than the older books. And when I say older books, when I was younger, I like to say not that long ago, but really it has been a long time ago, I was the big time avid reader, and I'm still a big time avid reader. I read a lot on the subways and on the trains on my way to work, and so I have quite a collection of books I don't mind altering. Okay, so at first I got a book from the Dollar Tree, and I started to rip the pages out of that book and nearly lost my mind. Let me explain to you why. And I guess it depends on what book's about, but this particular book, and I don't know if you can see it. See if I can find a page maybe where you can see it. Well, this particular book, and you can see it a little bit there. You see all those little like holes along the spine of the book? That's there because this book has stitching down the spine of the book. Stitching is what is being used in part to keep this book together and bound. And I didn't think it was a big deal at the time, but that stitching really does affect how the pages tear out. Because at least the way this particular book is bound, you can't rip one page without ripping out several along with it, almost like entire signatures at a time. This book is made of several signatures. If you can see, you see how this book is falling apart. I mean, there are quite a few signatures here, and somehow in the process they use some stitches to hold them together, and the end result is the way this particular book is bound. When you rip out one page, end up ripping out others attached to it. Okay, so you don't get a clean tear, and you get, in most of the cases, you get a tear that kind of damages the page next to it. So this, to me, garbage. Dollar Tree book, not for me. Okay, so I went to my book stash and just got, this is an older book. I would also suggest, maybe instead of buying newer books from the Dollar Tree, maybe go to a Goodwill store or look around in your home. You probably have some old books. The pages are much easier to rip out, and I'll show you that process in this book. This book is probably about, 4 or 5 years old, not all that old, and just the way this particular book was constructed, ripping out the pages is so much easier, and you do need to rip out pages. I would also recommend, when selecting your book, that you pick one, or you select one with a wide spine as opposed to a smaller, thinner book. And that is because as you add your pages and as you add your embellishments, the book is going to bulk up. And I don't know about you, books that are so chunky that you can't even properly close them. I would rather have a book that you can close properly. And I also want it, when it sits on a shelf, I would rather that it sit like this as opposed to like that, chunky and bloated, because there's way too much in the book, more so than the book can handle. I know I like to embellish. I know that I use thicker, heavyweight cardstock. All of that adds bulk, especially when you're using that cardstock on every single page of the book. So I made sure to get a book with a wider spine. So the size of your spine really is going to depend on what type of project you're doing. If you're doing a daily, like a monthly daily, a December daily, an October daily, whatever month daily, and you're going to have a lot of pages, I would encourage you to get a thicker book, thicker spine. If you're doing a special occasion, like a birthday altered book where you're just going to document someone's birthday or an anniversary, or it's, you have a set number of pages in mind, then you get whatever book works for your project. But that's what I have learned so far. I've learned to stay away from books from the Dollar Tree. And I'm sure it's not all of the books in the Dollar Tree that are put together that way, but the few books that I purchased from the Dollar Tree and tried working with, I nearly lost my mind. I got one book to work, and it took so much patience, and I had to go in and repair some of the pages when all was said and done, because, again, some of the adjoining pages were damaged while I was carefully ripping out other pages. So that's my 2 cents on the book. Do with that what you will. But once you have your book, now let's talk about altering the book itself. You will have to rip out pages from the book. And there's so many, how many pages you rip out, again, depends on your project. Some people count pages and have like this whole math formula knowing exactly how many pages to rip out. I don't. I am a big fan of a method that I learned from watching a tutorial that was posted by Jan. And I am going to link that tutorial down below because it was probably the most simple, straightforward, no nonsense. Just get in there and start altering your book tutorial, and one that probably I was the least nervous about in terms of doing. Okay, so her method was just open your book, okay, and you're going to, the first 2 pages you will keep, because you're going to stick these pages together. Okay, so you keep the first 2 pages, rip out. In her case, she did keep 2, rip out 5, keep 2, rip out 5, keep 2, rip out 5. Okay, and after doing that for a while in your book, you'll see that you have many much less pages. Okay, and you will also have a nice amount of space between each of the 2 pages, where there's plenty of space to add bulk and embellishments and whatnot. Okay, so I did most of this book, but I thought I would stop and demonstrate what I'm talking about. So in this book, first 2 pages I kept. I ripped out 10. You can see where I ripped out the 10 pages there. You see that? Then I kept 2, ripped out another 10. And in this case, I did 10 because this book has almost 700 pages. So I knew that I was going to have more than enough paper or pages for my project. So kept 2, ripped out 10, kept 2, ripped out 10, and continue doing that up to this point. This is where I pause. So I already ripped out 10. I'm going to keep these 2. And there's a reason why you keep those 2, and I'll explain that to you. And then rip out the next 10. Now, when ripping the pages out from the book, what I find helps to keep a tear close to the spine of the book so that you don't have all these ragged edges sticking out, is to keep the spine of the book itself up, straight up, as opposed to flat on your table. If you lay it flat out like that and you're ripping out the pages tend to rip furthest away from the spine. If you take the spine and you keep it upright like this as you're ripping out the pages, it tends to tear closer to the spine. So that's something that I kind of figured out. So that's 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Keep 2 and rip out 10. Four, 5, 6, and you see how cleanly that's ripping. 7. I couldn't get that done with the Dollar Tree books. 8, 9, 10. And when I'm ripping out the page, it's not affecting the page next to it. So I'm going to have some very clean tears throughout the whole book. And I'm going to continue that until I get, let's do 2 more, to the end of the book. 3, 4, 5, 6. And don't worry too much about this yet, okay? 8, 9, The reason you don't have to worry about this here so much is because you will later on be covering that with either washi tape or paint, and you can go in with a pair of scissors and cut it back a little bit if you want. But I wouldn't obsess too much about it at this point, because most, if not all of that, is going to be covered. Okay, so then I'm going to keep 2. And in this case, I'm at the end of my book. I want to keep these 2 pages together. So this is just an extra little straggler. I'm going to go ahead and rip that one out. Okay. Now, what you want to do is then go back to the beginning of the book and do that process again if you find you have too many pages. Now, how many pages should you have? It depends on how you're going to lay your book out. For Jan's book swap, she's requiring that it has 31 days for the month of December. And each side of the page is going to account for one of the days. So the front page doesn't count as a day. That's more just the front of the book. But then the back side of that is going to be day 1. Okay? And what you're going to do is for every day, glue 2 pages together to create pockets. I hope that makes sense. So the reason that you're keeping 2 and ripping out some is because you always want to keep 2 together so that you can glue them together to either create pockets, okay, which is a nice bonus, but mostly to just lend some stability and some strength to your pages, because these pages are really thin, super thin. You don't want to like embellish each side, like this side and that side. You want to glue 2 pages together. 2 together, you'll get a stronger page, okay? And you can also create pockets, and I'll show you that later on. That will be fun in helping you to embellish your book and, you know, create an interactive book. So that's why we keep 2. So this first page, the front, does not count as a day. That's just the front of the book itself. The back will be day 1. This will be day 2 right here. We glue those 2 pages together. Here's day 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and you continue that way until you account for 31 days. So to account for 31 days in a book, you need at least 16 pairs of these pages. 1, 2, you'll need 16 pairs of these, okay? Obviously, I have more than 16 here. Okay, last I counted, if you look, I have closer to 30, so I need to cut that down by half. The way I can cut that down by half again is to go through and maybe this time keep 1, tear out 2, keep a pair, tear out 2. Okay, if that makes sense. I hope that makes sense. So I would keep these 2 pages, tear out the next 2. Okay, keep these 2 pages, tear out the next 2. Keep the next 2, tear out 2. And using this method of going back and forth really will keep your book looking even, if that makes sense. It'll keep your pages inside and the space between each page looking even. I think I grabbed 2 on this one. If I did, that's okay. We'll just tear them both out. Yep, I did. That's okay. So that one got an extra tear, so we'll keep that. We'll keep the next 2 since I got a little heavy there. Heavy-handed, I tore an extra one. That's okay. That's the good thing about this. Okay, so we're going to keep 2 pages, tear out 2 pages. Keep 2 pages, tear out 2 pages. Again, doing this method, I'm going to have a pretty even amount of space between each of the days. That's going to allow me to add some really nice embellishments, use some very heavy cardstock. Okay. Now let's check in and make sure I'm not ripping out too many. So, okay, here's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, okay. 12, let's rip out the next one. 13, I think I'm doing good. We'll rip that out. This is probably, not that it's scary, but it's probably the most time consuming aspect of it, and it's probably the one that you're like freaked out the most in terms of messing up, because if you tear out too many pages, there is a way to basically put some of them back, but it's certainly easier just to get it right the first time around, right? So let's see what we have before I rip out any more. Look at the difference. Look at all that nice space between each of those pairs that you can embellish. So here's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18. So I still have 2 extra ones. What you can do to figure out what 2 you want to rip out, you can, if you hold your book this way, you kind of get an idea of how much space you have between each of the pair or each of the sets. And like here, that space looks a little tight, so maybe I would rip out this page right here just to create a little more space there. So it's all pretty much just trial and error. There's no real formula. Like, you know, when Jan did hers, she tore out 5 pages based on the size of her book. When I did mine, you saw I tore out 10, but now I'm going back and tearing out even more. So just be mindful that you need 2 pages, okay? 2 pages, and you need 16 pairs, okay, of pages. So here's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17. I still have 1 too many, so let's take a look again where we're going to rip out that last. Let's rip it from, they all look pretty even. Maybe I'll just take this one right here. Why not? Or, nah, we'll do that one, right? Let's pick this one. Just do it. Commit. Don't overthink. Okay, so now, see that? That's nice. You will be able to build up some bulk without having your book look like a swollen puffer fish. So let's count one more time. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16. Yay! So that's 16 pages, and each side of the page accounts for 1 day. So that'll leave you with 31 days. Okay, each side of the page being 1 day. Okay, because that's what her particular, Jan's particular altered book swap requires. But if you're just doing one of these at home and you don't care how many pages are in your altered book, then obviously once you go through that first round of ripping pages out, you don't need to do it again. But I just continue doing those rounds of ripping pages out until I get the 16 that I need to account for the 31 days. So next, let's glue the pages together.